The beautiful thing about food is it doesn't live on a wall. It lives in your soul, lives in your mind, and becomes memory, food data. So that's really what I think is the special thing about, and why people search out these experiences, is because of that reason, and truly how it makes you feel. And it's really one of the only arts that can also nurture your body and also tell the story of so many storylines before it hits the plate.
Welcome to episode 46 of People Are the Answer. I truly believe that people are the only answer to the world's many problems. I'm Jeffrey M. Zucker, a serial entrepreneur, here to learn how innovators are creating outsized, transformational social impact. Today's episode features Nyesha Arrington, an incredible chef, artist, entrepreneur, and changemaker. She's worked in Michelin star restaurants, owned and operated her own establishments, competed in international cooking competitions, and has been featured on a variety of TV shows, including Top Chef and Next Level Chef, which she hosts with Gordon Ramsay and more. She has also served as an inspiration to women, minorities, and others looking to break barriers. She makes food that hugs the soul and works hard to bring people together and create impact. Nyesha and I discuss her career journey, what it's like being on TV, how food can bring people together, and much more. Here's Nyesha Arrington on People Are the Answer. Nyesha, thank you so much for joining me on People Are the Answer.
Yeah, of course.
Would love if you could just start off by telling me who you are and, as you said it in your TED Talk, how you identify.
Yeah, that was an amazing opportunity, that TEDx talk out in Berkeley with an amazing room of academics. How do I identify? I would say that question and answer has taken on a few different facets through the journey of my life. I would say in a macro lens, I identify as a student of life.
And yeah, we'll definitely dig into some of those more specifics in that TED Talk later. But can you remind me, you're based in LA, is that right?
I am, yes, based in Los Angeles.
And in general in life, what would you say motivates you?
Uh, in general and in life, what motivates me is the ability to do things with my life that bring meaning and purpose. I consider myself a creative and a very right brain thinker. So, I sort of look through the lens of the human experience through creativity, right? And being a chef. So that's definitely what motivates me to always try to level up, right? And hit those new goal sets.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that attitude and perspective. And I know you grew up in Southern California as well. What was that like for you?
Yeah, growing up in Southern California, there is a very wide, sort of diverse terroir of food inspiration to draw from. I lived in Inglewood, and I lived in Gardena until I was about 7. So I grew up in LA itself up until about 7. And then my family and myself, we moved to the Antelope Valley, a city called Lancaster. So I lived there from about 7 until 17. In the early 80s, there was a lot of gangs happening around Los Angeles. So my dad moved my sister and my mom and my family to Lancaster. So it was great. I mean, I grew up playing team sports, softball, ultimately where we met our mutual friend Jeff. And great childhood. Did martial arts. Was in a lot of painting classes, sculpture. My piano. My parents just they wanted me to learn a lot of skills, right? To kind of distill them down and see how I can apply them to life.
Well, I'm sure that's served you well, and learning all those different skills and also learning different cultures, I know has been a big influence in your career as well as your Korean and Southern roots. Can you talk about how those things have influenced you?
Yeah, big time. So on my dad's side, my family is from Pass Christian, Mississippi, and they came over here to Los Angeles, where my dad's mom, Sylvia, she was cooking in different homes of like affluent people as their sort of home chef and home cook. And and then on my mom's side, my grandmother is from Korea, and she and my grandfather met in the Korean War and came to Los Angeles. And unfortunately, my dad's mom passed away prior to me being able to meet her. But my mom's mom had a pretty heavy hand in raising me, so I was exposed to a lot of different foods and cultures of Korea. Um, which I think really left a very bold impact on my palate as a young kid. Having foods that were drastically different than what I experienced um, going to school, or even what I'd eat at my mom and dad's house. I think that's really what led me to be a chef.
Yeah, you've mentioned that your palate is culture, and it certainly rings true when I hear you talk about those influences.
Yeah, I mean, my palette and my journey is represented by my life experience. So being able to be, in the best taquerias in LA, having the best access to house made kimchi, being able to go to my mom's side of the family and my dad's side of the family, and at family gatherings having like filet gumbo and hot water cornbread, and then homemade kimchi on the other end. Just really my palate was able to enjoy different flavor experiences through my childhood.
And then, it's very clear that cooking and food were a big part of your life early on. What drew you to make cooking a career and go to culinary school?
I feel like I've always been drawn to cooking. I have a very nurturing spirit, and I feel like cooking really is the sort of conduit between Mother Nature and creativity. So, I mean, being able to even spend time with my aunts in the kitchen and spending time with my grandmother in the kitchen, it's always was there. I think my path was written in the stars before I've lived it. I have always wanted to be a chef. I've always been drawn to the kitchen. I've always been not afraid of hard work. So, it was always going to be that I was to be a chef.
And how was your experience in culinary school at the Art Institute of California in LA?
Yeah, the Art Institute of California, 2001. It was a great experience, and I would say more so because of the chef instructors that I've had. Chef Chapman, in particular, he was a person that was very drawn to stock and sauce making, and really taught me the sort of basics and foundation of good cooking. Which is what I believe is beautiful stocks. Right, you get a really robust flavor when you can make a really amazing stock. And so when I think back to my days of culinary school, I always think in very dearly of Chef Chapman, and another chef of mine who was a sociology teacher, whose dad was a chef, and she, uh, I think, really had a beautiful lens to be able to teach sociology, having been so close to restaurants growing up. So I always really enjoyed her class. But yeah, culinary school for me, I really enjoyed it. I feel like after high school, um, I was bound to do something in the arts. And thankfully, I found that you can do cooking as a career as opposed to only a hobby. Um, or I would have played some sort of like competitive sport. But I think that there's attributes and components of professional cooking that sort of coincide with being an athlete. Um, but yeah, culinary school for me, it's like going to college. It's like you're fresh out of high school, you're living in your craft, and at that school in particular, there's like animators and visual effects artists, and it was just a sort of school for right brain thinkers. And so, I think that in itself was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, it's really cool that you got to go there. I've heard such great things from a variety of people, and um, after that, I know you had varying experience in a variety of types of kitchen, putting in all the insane work that's required in this industry. And how would you say that the varied experiences early helped you define sort of your style, and was travel part of that, or did that come later?
I'll be honest with you. I think I'm still on the path of discovering what my true style is, right? Because uh, going to culinary school, they teach you that French fine dining is really the antithesis of all great cooking, right? So I went down a path of that for a good part of my life, mostly Michelin star restaurants, and it's a huge part of my cooking DNA, right? A lot of my technique is uh, classically French inspired, but my flavors are very global, right? Like coming from a biracial family, having inspiration from both Korean and Southern roots, and also being able to travel, right? I mean, my style of cooking, I can't say that I can really just sum it up in, it is this, the first restaurant I opened, I called my style of cooking in that restaurant progressive California cuisine because I feel like that's sort of all encompassing, right? I think life is always about a progression. And so, happening to be a California native, that's sort of what rooted my ideas in cooking, right? As I sort of pull back the layers of self discovery. That was like early 2014. And then my second restaurant I called Native, um, which is sort of, I called sort of Angelino cuisine or like Los Angeles cuisine. And I think that in turn also is sort of narrowing down that scope, right? Because I think as I live my life, and learn about myself as a creative, it's like, I don't know that I have one style actually. I really truly enjoy going to Bali or going to in Indonesia and going to Morocco and being able to walk the land with the people, and I was able to pick some amazing vegetables and livestock and cook it in handmade kitchens of clay and stone and live fire with these beautiful families. And like for me, that was my style of cooking that day, because that's what grounded me, right? That's what makes sense. Um, so, I think that honestly, because it's a question I ask myself a lot, right? And people ask me that question a lot, like, what is your style of cooking? And I would say it's difficult to sum up in a few words, but I would say, from a macro lens, I would say it's progressive California cuisine, which is something I just made up. I feel like it kind of fit. Um, but I really, really enjoy drawing inspiration from around the world because really what I love is to connect people. Like that's what my style of cooking is a soul connector.
Yeah, and I've seen you describe your food as food that hugs the soul, which I really like that, and I can feel the warmth just within that concept of having watched you cook on a variety of shows and things like that.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I think that's why I'm kind of choosing to chef the way that I do these days is kind of these roving pop-ups and different dinner installations around the world because I do aim to hug the soul of people, and my opportunity to be able to go to Indonesia and Bali, when I was asked to go there, they literally said, we're looking for someone who can bring joy to our terroir, right? This is after the pandemic, and people just they want to feel the love, and I think food is really that beautiful connector, the vessel that we can do that.
It certainly is, and I do have a little more on that I want to dig into, but I just want to get to some more of your story here first. So, you climbed your way up the ladder in the culinary world, and that's notoriously a hard ladder to climb, especially for women and for people of color. What were some of the big challenges you faced along the way, and how did you deal with them?
Yeah, I think that the kitchen is a difficult place to stand out in general, right? But I think it gives you the most honest feedback, right? It's truly based um, in the results, right? If you put in the work, and that's what my mentor always used to say to me, it's based on results, right? Um, it's not based on even social media, what you post on social media. It's about what you're doing, what you're truly doing, right? It's going to show up, right? Are you honing your knife skills? Are you practicing Are you, tasting your food? Are you learning about new ingredients? And that's really what shows up, right, in the end result. And so, I think as the food world is ever changing, um, I think work ethic will never not be rewarded. And so I think, yes, being a woman of color in the kitchens was challenging, being just, I would say 9 times out of 10, the only person of color in these kitchens. More importantly to me, it was to be a good chef, you know, and that was very important to me, to take on a good mentor first. And I think um, that's really that sort of invaluable currency exchange is knowledge, right? So um, I think it's a beautiful thing because the food world today has really opened up a lot of opportunity for people, where there were a lot of gatekeepers before. Now there's a lot more opportunity for people to tell and share their stories.
Yeah. I mean, it's great to hear that things are evolving, and you kind of sounds like you let the food speak for itself in many ways, and your work ethic, and I can certainly appreciate that. And um, I saw that you ran your own kitchen at age 24. I'm really curious to know what that was like and how it impacted you.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jeff, because I've always kind of been I guess you could say, a high performer. Um, I always wanted to be the best at everything, whether that was sports or whatever, being in the kitchen or painting a picture in school. Like I always wanted to like do it the best. And so, I definitely did like climb up the ladder very quickly. Running my first kitchen at 24, it's like, you know, it's hard when you have like men or women, mostly men, like twice your age, that you're commanding this kitchen, and simultaneously, finding out who you are as a person and what your leadership style is. I think at 24, I mean, do we truly even have a lot of life data, actually? Like generally you kind of go out in the workforce around 17, 18, whatever it is, and you're still honing and learning those life skills, right? So I was very much um, doing that myself, right? So um, I think nothing was handed to me. I definitely earned that position. And, you know, the chefs before me who've taught me the ways of, cooking and work ethic and just grinding it out really, offered up those opportunities for me, so, um, I would say, it was a road, that was difficult, is difficult, but 100% worth it, and it's like, I think at the end of the day, you know, the age is kind of just a number thing. I think I was always kind of frustrated because people would be like, oh, you're so young. Can't believe you're so young. You're so young. And I was always almost like, oh, please don't ask me how old I am in these kitchens, because like I was always the youngest. Every kitchen I was in, I was always the youngest, but in my mind I was like the biggest, baddest, so it's like an interesting perspective,
I can totally relate to that dynamic, having been an entrepreneur from a very young age, sometimes going into big meetings where you're sort of the kid in the room, and yeah, it's like you feel like you on an extra level have to prove yourself and earn that respect.
Totally.
I've seen that or I saw that you have a very creative family and you're really into visual arts. How would you say those things affected your work?
Yeah. Well, I really am a big uh, fan of music. I'm very, very passionate about music, and my dad was playing the bass growing up. Um, all of our lives, my sister and I would hang out with him in the garage and listen to him and his buddies play um, old school funk music. And, we got to meet people like Quincy Jones and the Brothers Johnson. And just, we were always surrounded by like uh, music, right? And I kind of approach food in the same way, in that there these background flavors and foreground flavors and notes and low notes and high notes, and Uh, and I think food has a synonymous dialogue to the craft of music. And so, I kind of think about that when I'm constructing recipes or a dish, and it's about like, what do I want this person to feel? Is it the blues or is it poppy? And similarly, visually, right before the food even hits the plate, when it's in my brain, and I can go to an empty pad of sketch paper and sketch it out, and kind of pick and choose, just through the mood, through the music and the composition of a dish, and then also texturally, and it all kind of can play the tune that you want it to, and the food is the are the ingredients, right? And so that I would say, growing up in a very like art driven household really kind of helped me bring those visions to life.
It's just incredible to hear you describe food and sort of the way that it plays into so much of our lives. And, I really appreciate you sharing that. And obviously, you're an artist as well. And I saw that you have an event called Food is Art. And was that kind of an expression of you showing kind of that food is, in fact, art?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me it is. I think that to say that you're um, a person of the arts, I think for me, in my opinion, culinary artistry is one expression of an art form, right? Because uh, when I think about craftsmanship and the idea of what art is, you're taking something that's intangible in the mind and in the soul, and you're actualizing it, right? Whether that's music or architecture or a sculpture, painting, photography, you're creating something. And so the beautiful thing about food is it doesn't live on a wall. It lives in your soul, lives in your mind, and becomes memory, food data, so that's really what I think is the special thing about, and why people search out these experiences, is because of that reason, and truly how it makes you feel. And it's really one of the only arts that can also nurture your body and also tell the story of so many storylines before it hits the plate, of the farmer, the rancher, the soil, the land, the people, the ancestors, the legacy. There's so many through lines that become a stopping point, and then lives in that person. And based off that experience, then they can go in their kitchen and recreate a dish for their family or loved ones, at any part of their journey. And it's just a very powerful tool, food.
Speaking of that through line and the stories that you tell, you've been celebrated for your advocacy of using farm fresh, local ingredients that are responsibly sourced. Can you talk about why this is a passion, and why everyone should be passionate about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, I mean, we've all heard the few dialogues of, climate change and sustainability. And I think these are like sort of multifaceted topics, because in the idea of sustainability, there's varying levels where we can celebrate this. It's not saying I want to be humanitarian and live in this sustainable lifestyle, so I don't eat meat because it's not sustainable for the planet. No, maybe that's just understanding where this meat is coming from, right? And what is the footprint of that meat, right? And I think a lot of it, of really what my ethos is the intentionality, right? Um, I think that's really where I would say this is most important, right? It's just the intentionality and being conscious, upcycling and recycling when we can. I mean, I'm I'm grateful to live here in California, but I've been able to grow like a few. Um, it was like a pandemic project, but now kind of little thriving avocado trees based off of an avocado that I bought, from the store or got from a farmer's market. And now one day, probably not for a long time, but those trees will fruit, and I think that's an example of being sustainable. Taking your scallions green onions and putting the roots in water, you can grow new green onions within a week, right? And it's like those things, if we have the tools to be regenerative as humans, so I think I think that the more that we can celebrate those things, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think sharing those few bits of knowledge, letting people just know there's these little things that you can do that will add up and that aren't hard or aren't going to add difficulties to your life.
Exactly.
So you've been chef and partner at multiple restaurants, and it's an industry I've spent some time in as well. It's a very tough industry. What can you say about that overall experience, and what it's like trying to have a restaurant on an ongoing basis?
Well, I would say that experience is different for everyone. I think for me, um, you know, I've found I'll use the word success at a young age. So having the opportunity to partner with people, being in my 20s, like, uh, you know, I personally did it. My first restaurant I opened in 2014, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, finally!" And for me, I was like, even am I ready for this? Like I'm definitely more the like slower is better approach, and then very quickly open the second one after that. Um, and I would say those experiences, they taught me a lot. I would say uh, at times when I felt like, oh, I failed or something because I ended up closing both of them after them being highly acclaimed, uh, me being chef of the year, multiple accolades behind it. But I think the model of business has to make sense from the beginning, right? And we already know that we're dealing with such small margins in the restaurant world, right?
Right. The economic model of restaurants, as they are known standardly, doesn't really work. It's not sustainable.
I mean, it's a very interesting model for business, um, and I think and you see, and the people build their restaurant recipe, if you will, um, in different ways. Some of them monetize on merch and to go and the brand, right? The chef brand outside of the restaurant. Some people model it off of pure volume, right? 300-seat restaurants. Some people do less volume and have, $1,000 check average. So they do 7 covers a night and they're good, so many different models and ways to approach it. And I would say, you know, I had to look in different verticals outside of the food space for me to understand the and gain more business acumen, right? Because you see a lot of like people in the tech world and their first 3 businesses fail and then they hit, and it's like I really had to like look at that, because it's like you said, as an entrepreneur, it's like sometimes it doesn't work the first time, and so I really had to adapt some of that model because it could be discouraging, especially when something's so close to your soul, that doesn't work out, right? So, and I think it's important to yeah, to build out the teams very well from the beginning. I think that's imperative. We're ultimately in a people business, and you have to value that. And I think it takes time to grow and learn, how to do that, right?
Yes, it absolutely does, and um, it's a crazy business. And having been an entrepreneur and certainly failed more times than I've been successful, I've taken each failure as a learning experience, and it sounds like you did the same. And I saw in an interview that you are also a believer in failing upward and how you can learn from all these experiences.
Yeah, I 100% stand by that. Failing upwards very important, and I again, I like I said, I'm a student of life and I am a chef, but I also, my perspective is widened outside of only my industry. So I do go to a lot of leadership summits and dreamer workshops and just places where I can share big ideas with people, outside of only the food space. So I think these kinds of things, failing upwards and it is more so adapted outside of maybe only the restaurant industry. Um, and so, I think it's hard because I mean I can tell you I talk to so many chefs and I'm like, oh, it didn't work out, and and then they're like, do you know how many restaurants I closed? Or like, you know, you're not the first one but the last, but it feels like the worst, at that time. But it's like, what else do you have other than to take the lessons and then adapt them in a new environment, right? I mean, for me, I think that's really what the human experience is about, is being able to learn and adapt and grow. Like, I don't think we come out of the womb just knowing everything, you know? And it also can't only happen through secondhand nature. Sometimes you have to put in the rep and fail upward. And I think that is part of the journey. And it makes for a very interesting life.
Yeah, it does, and I'm sure there were beautiful things about each experience, including all the learnings that you took with you, and you talked about food that makes you feel, and I'll just quickly mention an experience I had at Leona years ago with Jeff Howard, our mutual friend, and he and I were on this absurd diet, and he gave you like the parameters, and you made us what was by far the best dish we'd had in months. And I don't even remember all the specifics of what I was eating, but I just recall that it was amazing. And I just had this really awesome feeling of warmth. And it just brings my brain back to like a very beautiful evening. That was one for me.
No, that's beautiful. I loved that restaurant. I'm telling you, like, warmth is the best adjective I could use to describe that place. And um, forged some amazing friendships out of that restaurant. Leadership team and the team that executed alike, like incredible people.
Well, I'm glad that I got to experience that, and look forward to having your cooking again sometime. And where I first encountered you was via your work on TV. I've been a Top Chef fan for a very long time, so that was where you first came to mind. And then obviously our friend has talked about you over the years as well. So I feel like I've kind of been following along in your career, and I wasn't going to not talk a little bit about some of these experiences. And I was just in doing my research, saw that while you were on Top Chef season 9, you were also on a Food Network show called Chef Hunter around the same time. What was it like doing two big TV projects at once, basically?
Big year for me. That was 2012, and yeah, season 9 of Top Chef, and then did Chef Hunter, and that was really the first time that I did television. And simultaneously between that, got my first executive chef position, and it was like Nyesha had her like big girl pants on, but it's like, the thing is, like, I just relish experience. I relish opportunity. So just going out there and trying to be as courageous as possible and be out there. It was challenging. It's really difficult cooking in high pressure environments.
I can only imagine. I don't know how you and fellow contestants get things done in these crazy amount of times that they allot, and things like that. And just being in the spotlight while you're honing your craft has got to be difficult to get used to. Was that a struggle at all?
It was. I think it's hard when you are used to cooking slow and spending your time to make sure something's perfect, and you have to speed that process up 15 fold. And so are 15 other people who are vying for the same thing that you are. um, yeah, it's really hard, because your restaurant brain wants to tell you to save your trim and cryovac it and label it and put it away, and it's like you just going and going and going. And my OCD brain like really loves a clean workstation, and I think that's like the hardest thing for me is to try to not clean up as much as I go.
Yeah.
But I think it's just part of the grid system. Like you have to build time in.
It must have had some kind of impression on you, just the work in front of the camera, as considering that you still do it. What was it about cooking on TV and interacting with fans that drew you to stick around?
I think I've always had this kind of innate sense in me that I would be in entertainment somehow. I really love the idea to be able to share a message with a lot of people at once, right? I can, speak with you today, spend some time, but, hopefully, you know, share the message with multiple people simultaneously and similarly in front of the camera on TV. It's the same thing. So if I can, um, you know, do it once and it entertains multiple people, like I love the idea of that. And I think especially just being on the few shows that I've been on recently, it's really fun to connect with other people that you might not have the opportunity to meet.
Yeah, it's a really cool perspective to have, just that you're getting these experiences that you otherwise wouldn't have had. And would you say all this cooking in front of a camera experience has changed the way you cook?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that it has. I wouldn't say it has changed. I would say I've had the opportunity to have more access to um, amazing ingredients. Like, we get to work with the most incredible product, and I think that in itself and being able to see so many different techniques from people to other chefs, it's like it's such a beautiful experience, so I think that impacts my cooking. It has to in some way, but I think that there's always going to be a core style to the way I cook based off my journey lived.
You've spent time as both a competitor in these shows as well as a judge or a guest. What is the difference like? Obviously the pressure's different.
Yeah. Well, I always can empathize with the chef who's in the kitchen. I'm not that far out of cooking competitions myself, so now kind of judging, it's like I will always approach judging from a cook's perspective. Like I will never be like, I'm the judge and I'm going to judge your food now. Like I have to also think about the things I'm not seeing on a plate. Like where was this person trying to go? You know, like what is the story they're trying to tell me? Whether it was successful or not, and hopefully allow that person to leap with some new bit of knowledge. Right? I think ultimately that's what they're there for, is to have an experience themselves, right? And put themselves up against other chefs and test themselves and test their limits. Um, and so, you know, it's fun, and that's the thing that keeps me going. It has to always be fun.
Yeah, it's especially within cooking shows. And there's some in reality TV otherwise in competition, but in cooking shows, it seems these experiences are so impactful on the lives of the people that are contestants. And obviously, I'm getting it from the angle of the network or whoever's creating it that is feeding me these great stories. But it really does seem like these have tremendous impacts because it's pushing people out of their comfort zone. It's making them test what they're capable of, doing things they never believed that they could do. How would you say that these experiences affect the contestants?
Yeah, I think almost immediately you're put on a stage, right? So just having the sheer access to millions of eyeballs across the nation, you know people can always relate to one or a few archetypes of human that are on the show, right? So you get a fan base very quickly, and so maybe a fan base that a person in California wouldn't have had access to in Wisconsin or wherever that is. Um, so I think just having this to be able to build a platform so quickly, it has a very heavy impact on on the brand building part of it.
And I've enjoyed watching the first season of Next Level Chef that you've been doing recently. I think it's a really cool new take on the cooking competition show. What are your thoughts on it? What's the experience been like?
My thoughts on it are that it's like the coolest job ever. It's like, uh, because I get to be a voice of reason for the chef, you know, but and I'm like kind of in the competition with them, but I'm kind of not. So it's like the idea to be able to stand beside is beautiful to me, and not kind of on top of or down. I think uh, that's what I love about this show, and I love um, that it it is a progressive way to approach a cooking competition. It's like it levels the playing field, right? There's home cooks, social media chefs, and also professional chefs, right? So um, the idea that a lot of these elite cooking shows, it's not just professional chefs, like, most of them are, all of them are, which makes sense. But this one, it's different. It's like a little lighter, like home cooks are invited, social media chefs are invited. It's just food people. And the beautiful thing is that there's three different kitchens for people to you know level the playing field, right? Because a professional chef might not do so well in the basement, right? Or vice versa, right? So if you give a home chef a multi-million dollar kitchen to create a dish, they might make something spectacular, and so um, just giving everyone the opportunity to shine is the coolest part of it, because I'm essentially at a crossroads and intersection in their life, right? And so to be able to champion that is a gift.
Absolutely. And as someone that has watched just a lot of the cooking shows over the years, it's certainly one of the freshest takes that I've seen. Like you said, it's lighter. I really enjoy it. And for those, listening that haven't checked it out, I highly suggest it. You co-host with Gordon Ramsay and Richard Blaze. Yeah, season one was a lot of fun. And I know season two is coming soon.
Season 2 is coming soon. We are the first slated spot after the Super Bowl.
That's
It's
amazing.
amazing.
Well, I'm not like the biggest football guy. I'll probably have the Super Bowl on, but I know I'll be leaving it on then.
Amazing. Thank you.
Of course. And let's see. We've covered a lot of really good stuff on the TV side. I really appreciate that. Are there any past shows or anything coming up that you're particularly excited about or proud of?
Yeah, I would say the digital stuff that I've been shooting with Eater. It's a little uh, show called Plate Worthy that I co-produce, and it is phenomenal to be able to go into these kitchens of chefs and be able to learn their signature dishes and work next to them side by side to learn about the stories and the ethos behind them. That has been one of the most rewarding opportunities that I've had. Um, it's very, it's me, it's the chef, it's a cup, like two cameras maybe, and it's just very real, and so um, I love that. I love to be able to uproot these stories, and it's just like the viewer is essentially a fly on the wall in the kitchen of two creatives.
Yeah. I'm excited to check that out. And some of my pre-interview research, I did watch a couple videos on YouTube. Most recently, the one where you recreated Salisbury steak TV dinner, which I really enjoyed and was impressed with. So I got to try that.
Oh, good. Yeah, that was a fun one.
So, you've done a lot of really cool things in your career, things that, most people probably wouldn't have expected when you first say, I'm becoming a chef. I think that from everything I've seen, from things all over the place, it's clear that you've really been a huge inspiration, not only to chefs, but all sorts of people around the world, especially females and people of color. Just you've shown that there are these institutionalized barriers that can be broken through. Like when you hear that you're helping people break through barriers they didn't know they could get through, what is that like to you?
It's interesting, man, because like I don't consider myself like a celebrity. I'm just like normal Nyesha, and it's like uh, when I was 9 years old, like rollerblading in my parents' front yard, I always knew that I wanted to be successful. I didn't know what that necessarily meant for me, but I knew when I would look at the adults, I said, I think being successful means being happy, right? And so I thought about what does that mean to me? And so for me, it's cooking, and so being able to then also have an impact on people, it is incredible. It is incredible to get a DM message from someone in Africa who says, I watched your YouTube video, or someone in Malaysia who's like, I followed you on Next Level Chef and you're my favorite. And it's like, I started cooking because of you. It's like, it is, it's something that's new to me, it, to say it makes my heart skip a beat. And it's like pressure, it's pressure to try to make sure that I'm doing good in the world, like I think it's a beautiful thing. I'm grateful.
Well, to that, I would say, I think being yourself has gotten you here into this point, so you should keep doing that, and I think you'll be good. Um, and I think it's additionally, just through like the TV lens, it's been really cool to see the impact you've been able to have. But you've also been in these like international cooking competitions, and brought even more people's eyes to what you've been able to do. And are there any sort of international competitions that have been especially interesting? I know I read that you've been to, excuse me if I say it wrong, Bocuse d'Or.
Focus store. Yep.
What has that been like, cooking on an international stage?
Well, I went to watch the competition first in Lyon, in France, with the competing culinary team from the US. Before I then, the following opportunity, went and tried to represent Team USA myself. So I made it to the semifinals. Um, but I mean, I used to watch that competition growing up, and there were never any women. There were never any women of color. And, when I went to culinary school, I said, I want to be the first, like everything. I just want to do really well and be recognized for it. Um, and, that comes in different forms, right? Being able to go and compete and, be chosen to be there, um, and plate the dish in front of people that I've bought their cookbooks for 20 plus years, the greats of that style of cooking, was a moment I'll never forget. Like, it was the most challenging thing I've done in my culinary career, I think. Um, but also the most rewarding. I mean, it's kind of like the World Cup of cooking, essentially. And it's all about sweating the details. It is all about um, the most finesse and fine dining that you can potentially cook.
Awesome. Well, it's exciting to learn more about that. And, amongst all of these other things, see that you also have a consulting and catering business that you own and operate.
I do. We've been doing some pretty cool dinner parties around Los Angeles, and um, So I don't even know what to say. It's like, it's humbling to be able to go into some pretty dope homes around Los Angeles, and you know, pretty cool, like, high profile client list. And um, it's awesome because for me it exercises a different muscle in my kind of culinary artistry muscle group. It's like, I'm there, I'm cooking with my team, and it's like, maybe on TV, I'm doing something else. It's more, it's TV. And then being able to go to someone's restaurant and cook a dish with them, it's a different lens. But to be able to go and put on dinner experiences for people in their homes is like, it's a pretty cool facet of really what inspires me. It's funny to hear you mention these things. It's like, oh yeah, I do that. Oh yeah, I do that too. Like, you forget because you're just doing the things.
I totally get that. And with myself and with guests that I've had, it's like no one's ever really just like put it all together like that. And so I'm glad that you're getting the opportunity to sort of zoom out and take a look at all this.
Totally.
And additionally, I saw that you are working on some virtual cooking classes. Is that something that started in the pandemic or something else that drew you to that?
Yeah. It has definitely started in the pandemic, and I haven't done them in a while. Definitely do. I get lots of Instagram requests to do them, so I should probably do one soon. But I really enjoy doing the cooking classes. Yeah.
So if listeners want to join in, they should just follow you on social, and they'll find out how.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'll do one soon. I would say, yeah, maybe after the holidays.
So in your TEDx talk that I watched, you mentioned this experience that you had in minute 4 in the ice bath. Is that something you're up for telling us about?
Sure. Yeah. So I think I mentioned that I really love to travel, and I had the opportunity to go to Hong Kong to do a pop up, uh, late 2019, and I walked through the um, mountains and went and saw the big Buddha, and it was such an amazing landscape. It was like so humid and hot, and I was like trekking up this mountain, and I was pretty much the only one there. It's like not a lot of people around, but what I saw was like what I saw and what I heard was the most impeccable sound of peace. Like you could hear a pin drop, and like looking out into this vast mountain range, all I saw was lush green mountaintops and like this butterfly, and like I just remember like feeling like an ant. Like I was like, it just gives you perspective. We live in our day-to-day lives, and we're hustling and bustling and doing the email things and doing all the networking things and whatever. And it's like, when you go out in nature and you reground yourself, it's like it truly gives you perspective on what your place is in the world. And I started doing ice baths around that time, and I remember I was doing this like cleanse. It's like raw food cleanse, and like I don't remember what day I was on, but had to been more than a week at that time, and then I was in the ice, and I think when our bodies are not processing sugar and caffeine and alcohol and meats and dairy and all that stuff, we can really tap into a higher consciousness. And so when I was in the ice, like it's all about breath control, and so I was doing my breath work, and I like literally had like an out of body experience. Like it was like I literally in my whole entire life like never felt something like this, where it was like all of a sudden it just had this like deafening silence, and like it was like I was in that mountaintop, and I was sitting on top of the mountain, like sitting like legs folded, like meditating, and I was like a drone, like circling my body, seeing myself but in my own mind. And like I just remember this deafening silence, like heard nothing, but people were around me in that ice bath, and I heard nothing. And um and I remember when I saw that, when I realized what I was looking at, like I like came to, because it was too powerful for me to harness. Like I and shit was crazy, man. Like yeah, I I should probably do one again soon. That's the only time that's ever happened like that, and I think it's only purely because of the state of like my body was on high function.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear like about you putting yourself through those experiences and the learnings that you got from them, and certainly seems like that's had an effect on things that you've done since. And I think just kind of the constant theme that I'm hearing here is, food is tremendously impactful on individuals and on the world. And, perhaps it's not even talked about enough. I might argue, and I'm curious what you think, that a meal is the most powerful shared experience that people can have.
No, there's 100% zero doubt in my mind. I think food can also, I mean, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, it can break down barriers. I think it has the power to heal, right? I think it has the power to uh, um, mend nations. I mean, imagine, countries that are at war against one another sat down and had a delicious shared meal of their people's food. Like that brings tears to my heart and my soul. Like that is so powerful, you know, and to be able to share that experience with people is like it's incredible. Um, and so, you know, I think yeah, you know, people that are even just with people that are have disagreements, you know, there's like that show, The Red Table Talk. Like I always imagined like that, but what if it's like a food in a food related sense? Like it's so beautiful, you know, to be able to share a meal and have conversation is incredible.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. And just the idea of having two very divided cultures make each other's food for each other is a cool way of potentially bridging some gaps.
Yeah, 100%.
So you've done all of this cool work all over the world, you know, with and without food, with some incredible people. You've talked about some of the great messages you received. Is there any particular story of when it just hit you how much your work could affect change?
I think always it's about like, you know, I've said this before, but you know, being a sort of like a bridge to the past and a gateway into the future. Like I and you and anybody has that power, you know, and you know, me particularly, yes, because I'm a chef and I'm able to pluck recipes from my aunts and my grandmothers and you know my past mentors and their parents and so on and so forth and the previous ancestors who've lived, and then you know because of a mistake in measurements in the kitchen, you know, oh, I came up with something new, dope, you know, I can add that applied technique to an old recipe and then bang, I got something new, right? And that's a new gateway into the future because I made that dish at, you know, so and so's house up in the Hollywood Hills. And then my team members like, oh, sick. I'm really inspired by that. I'm gonna now add kale, whatever. Like, and it's like that shit's powerful, you know. So, like, I think yes, and I think, dude, when I was writing that TEDx talk, like, I don't think I've ever had a more moment of stillness and reflectiveness in writing it because I was like really looking back on my life and like and looking in, you know, for the first time in 20 years because it's like for the preceding 20 years it was just like I was looking forward. I was looking like go, get to your north star, keep letting it guide you and not stepping back really a lot. And I think when I was writing that talk um, earlier this year, that was the first moment in time that I realized like how powerful the shit is.
That's amazing to hear. And I know that you would credit a lot of people with helping you get there. You mentioned the importance of mentorship earlier. You've worked with some incredible chefs. You know, anyone in particular that you want to cite as an impactful mentor?
Um, mentor, one particularly is a gentleman who is amazing. He and you know I think his name's Josiah Citron, and he taught me a lot about cooking. You know, he taught me a lot about cooking, and yeah, I you know I worked through 3 restaurants with him, um, and I think you know when I think about a mentor, like he's the first person that comes to mind. You know, because I remember being on the line with him in his restaurant and he said, I'm going to mentor you. And I was like, oh, interesting. Okay. And I didn't understand, you know, necessarily at that time in my early 20s what that looks like, you know? And so, you know, I think you know, his taglines or his mantras are in the pursuit of excellence, you know, because it's always a pursuit, you know, you don't, nothing is always any time. It's like nothing's perfect, you know, but you can try to pursue excellence, you know, and can get pretty close, you know. But I would say he has definitely made the largest impact in my cooking career.
Really cool to hear how he took you under his wing, and certainly a really impactful chef. Um, if you'd like, you can ask me a question.
What brought you to start this podcast?
Yeah, so a variety of things. I'd long been interested in broadcast, having broadcasted hockey growing up and things like that. And, been involved in the entertainment industry. And a big issue in the entertainment industry has just been the barriers to entry, all the politics that are involved with getting something made. And so, I knew I'd wanted to do a podcast for a while. And I'd been meeting a lot of really cool people doing amazing things, whether it was via my work in drug policy and criminal justice reform or via, all the variety of industries that I've been involved in. And so one day just sort of hit me, let's just talk to innovators in social impact, people that are doing cool things to make the world a better place. And for me, it was a creative outlet and an opportunity to build my voice while also highlighting people that are doing really cool work. And so it's been a little over a year now, and it's been really cool. Yeah, it's been a fun experience so far, and just trying to continue to grow it.
Nice. That's amazing. I'm sure you're inspiring and giving a lot of people hope. I mean, we need to share more human interest stories, so it's amazing to be a part of this platform.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And I think that my goal when I first came up with I need to start a podcast, I just wanted it to be positive. There's so much negativity in our culture right now. So just shining a light on the good, because for all the terrible things that are going on in our world, there's even more great stuff going on.
Absolutely.
So if everything were to end tomorrow, what would you say that you are most proud of or most grateful for thus far in your career?
I would say the thing I'm the most proud of is my relationship with my family. I think like we are a tribe. Like my sister, my dad, my mom, like I think that they really it's just nice to feel like a part of a beautiful family. I think um, you know I'm the most proud about that, and I think I'm extra like open to it because they just spent the week with me and just left. But I thought, as much as I'm gallivanting across this planet, just to be able to have my parents here and be able to host them in my place, like it's kind of cool, and so it really was beautiful to be able to share time with them. So yeah, I'm really proud of that.
That's beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing it. And this last question is the big question that I wrap up the episodes with. If you could snap your fingers and fix one thing in the world, what would it be, and how do you think that change would reverberate?
I think I would take away, I think more, it would be just greed. I think that could probably solve a lot. In my mind I said world hunger, but I think if we just say take out greed, like that would probably help a lot of varying issues under that, from food to shelter and monetary gain that some people have access to and other cultures don't. I think that would probably even out a lot.
Yeah, there would be a lot of dominoes that fall if that were to happen. So I hope that we're moving in that direction in our world. And for me, it's certainly been inspiring to speak with you. I'm sure that listeners will want to get engaged. How can listeners best support you and your impact?
Wow. Thank you for that question. I would say, support the journey. I think humans evolve over time, right? I certainly have. And I think I am in an evolution of, trying to do great things as much as I can, and as much as I have the capability to. So I would say, yeah, just like ride with me. It's a constant evolution, and as I soul search to really actualize some of these ideas that I have percolating over time, just to be a part of them, and to be communicative. I think that's helpful, to get to know people are out there, because a lot of times as artists you put stuff out and it's like you don't know how it's resonating. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me and for sharing your story, and really enjoyed our time, and I look forward to speaking again soon.
Likewise. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for listening to this episode of People Are the Answer. To find out more, go to peoplearetheanswer.com.